Good morning. My name is Bruce Gagnon and I work for the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. This year marks our 21st year of organizing. On our table just out the door to the left, next to the Green Party table, is our newsletter, Space Alert, which covers in much more detail many of the things I'll be talking about today. I want to begin with just a quote from the author of this book called Cry Korea, written in 1951, a British journalist by the name of Reginald Thompson. He says, now in the 20th century, as it moves towards sanity or mad despair, the slayer needs merely to touch a button and death is on the wing, blindly, blotting out the remote, the unknown people, holocausts of death, veritable mass productions of death, spreading an abysmal desolation over whole communities and the fertile body of the earth. In these days, I lost my last illusion about war. I had called myself a war reporter. It would be more accurate to call myself a reporter of death. Death in all of its ghastliest forms. From the Korean War, where over 1 million civilians were killed by the United States and their allies. And today we're creating enemies faster than we can kill them. I believe that this is no accident. It's not being done because our government is incompetent or inept. I remember once hearing Secretary of Endless War Donald Rumsfeld tell the media, "We plan everything." And I think generally that's true. Targeted assassinations have become standard operating procedure for the CIA and the Pentagon. Special forces teams have long made use of military satellites to select targets, get groups using helicopters to and from the kill zones, and then conduct follow-up space surveillance to see how the job went. Now, even more high-tech death squads use armed drones to do the same dirty work. Targeted killing from afar. These death squads use the same satellite technology to carry out their evil missions. I live in Maine, and our new independent Senator, Angus King, recently called drones a very smart artillery shell, a more humane weapon. We've been organizing in our state to get the public to push back against this kind of thinking. We've also been working with the ACLU in Maine to pass a bill in the state legislature that would require police agencies to obtain warrants before they can use drones to snoop on the public. Maine's Attorney General, the former Vice President of the Democratic Party in our state, opposes the warrant provision of the bill and wants police to have the power to make their own surveillance rules. She calls drones, quote, an economic driver for the state, unquote, and insists on having language in the bill that would allow the weapons testing of drones in the northern part of Maine. Right now, there's a political stalemate because of the pressure coming out of the peace movement, churches across the state, civil libertarians, and the bill is tabled. More than 500 aerospace corporations today are eager to develop this new drone market just in the United States. The drone industry is pushing back hard against those who say that local police should be required to have search warrants before using drones to spy on the public. Industry lawyers say we have nothing to fear. That all we have to do is ask local police and they will be transparent about the drone use. Yeah, good laugh line, right? Throughout our history, though, we've seen that the government has over and over again used every available means to monitor innocent people and to suppress legitimate dissent, and drones will be no different. There's a $2 billion, that's with a B, 1 million square foot facility being built by the National Security Administration, the NSA, outside of Salt Lake City in Utah. It's a phone, fax, and email data storage and analysis warehouse called the Utah Data Station. Everything about the facility is top secret. It's scheduled to open this summer. It's the Taj Mahal of the police state. It appears that there will be 6 permanent drone test centers across the nation. Communities in 37 states have applied, including Hancock Field, to be the host of one of those 6 sites. Originally, the plan called for 4 of these test bases across the nation, but your senator from New York, Schumer, a quote-unquote good Democrat, pushed for 6 of them, knowing that it would help shoehorn Hancock onto the list. The military-industrial complex is America's job program today. What does that say about the soul of our nation? That we have to make weapons and endless war in order to provide jobs for folks so they can put food on the tables for their families. There's now an effort to turn northern Maine, former air base, now closed, into a missile defense deployment site on the East Coast. Congress has mandated a study to determine whether Maine or Fort Drum, here in upstate New York, would be selected as a missile defense interceptor deployment site. These so-called missile defense systems are now being used by US and NATO to surround Russia and China. Infrared and radio band sensors used by the military can now peer through clouds and foliage and even detect and hear people inside their homes. During the last few years of the US occupation of Iraq, unmanned aircraft monitored Baghdad 24/7, turning the city into an equivalent of a convenience store crammed full of security cameras. This technology is called persistent surveillance and is made possible by new generations of very expensive military satellites. It costs huge amounts of money to build these satellites and then launch them on rockets that blow up from time to time. By 2020, the Pentagon hopes to have a new layered space surveillance architecture in place that will be able to integrate space, cyberspace, and ground combat through robotics for the delivery of a seamless web of global domination, or as they like to call it, full spectrum dominance. This basically means that they would control conflict at every level, on the ground, in the oceans, on the air, in space, and in cyberspace. The mainstream media commentators mislead just a bit by saying that drones lower the cost of warfare. And most people just accept this as the gospel truth. They overlook the point that drones are connected to this huge industrial project that has put into space a constellation of satellites that are linked to ground stations all over the planet, that relay their signals in real time, split-second time, from places like Creech Air Force Base in Nevada or here in Hancock. These downlink stations in Australia, England, Greenland, New Zealand, Colorado, and other places around the planet help fly the drones. They're the triggers. The satellites are the triggers for this very expensive way of waging war. In June 2012, the second flight of the new military space plane, the X-37, touched down at Vandenberg Air Force Base after 469 days in orbit. This unmanned super drone is a first strike attack system, part of the global strike doctrine, now underway at the Strategic Command. In an annual war game set in the year 2016, the U.S. military launches an attack on China, and the first weapon that is used is this military space plane, the X-37. The Pentagon says that our role in the U.S. under corporate globalization of the world economy will be security export, and that we won't have conventional jobs anymore. We won't be making shoes and refrigerators and televisions and phones. Instead, we'll build weapons for endless war and send our kids overseas to die for oil and precious mineral extraction on behalf of the corporations. All of this won't come cheap. Some years ago in the industry publication, Space News, they said we've got to come up with a dedicated funding source in order to pay for all this. And we have, they said. We're now sending our lobbyists to Washington to secure this funding source. They called it the entitlement programs that officially are Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and what's left of the welfare program. These are the programs that the military-industrial complex intends to defund in order to pay for endless space-directed war. The militarization of everything around us is a spiritual sickness. Lakota holy man Lane Deer talked about the green frog skin, the dollar bill, and how the white man was blinded by his love for the dollar. His spiritual connection to the Mother Earth is broken. Thus, we need a transformation of the heart and our entire way of thinking. And we should repeatedly be calling, as part of that transformation, for the conversion of the military-industrial complex. As Kathy said, UMass Amherst Economics Department has done a definitive study that shows when our tax dollars are used on military, they create less jobs than in any other instance, whether we fund healthcare, education, or building rail systems. In fact, when you build rail systems, you double the number of jobs that you get from military production. So if we're going to deal with climate change, the coming ravages and realities of climate change, we need to be demanding not only to get rid of the drones, but to convert the military-industrial complex. Thank you very much.
Bruce is the coordinator of the Global Network Against Weapons and Nuclear Power in Space. Between 1983 and 1998, Bruce was the state coordinator of the Florida Coalition for Peace and Justice, and he's worked on space issues for 30 years. He initiated the campaign to bring our war money home in Maine in 2009, and it spread to other New England states and beyond. So, welcome, Bruce.
Hello. It's a great honor to be here with all of you. I've been following these protests from afar for some time, and I'm just thrilled to be here with you. Today, when we reach the gate, a group of us from Veterans for Peace, what we call the Veterans Peace Team, is going to stand and read the names of children from Pakistan who have been killed by these drone strikes. This is the real terrorism. You know, when we hear about Boston, and we hear about how wrong it was to kill innocent people, isn't it equally wrong? Isn't it equally dark and evil for us to do the same thing in Pakistan and Afghanistan and now on the African continent? And shouldn't we resist all forms of terrorism? Because isn't our killing as much of terrorism as anybody else's? So for me, this is very special to be here to make that statement, that I stand against everybody's terrorism, especially our own. We have significant problems in this country. Growing poverty, growing unemployment, now climate change we face, and the future generations are going to face it even worse. These are the problems that we should be dealing with today. These are the places our tax dollars should be spent, not on more war. Bring our war dollars home. Thank you.